This is Aaron Golub, host of the Blind Ambition podcast. We'll be bringing you world-class leaders, entrepreneurs, and athletes, people who have overcome obstacles and used their ambition to create enormous success in their lives. If you enjoy this podcast, if you get anything out of it, the only thing I'll ever ask is that you subscribe, rate, and review. Hope you enjoy. Hey, what's up, everyone? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Blind Ambition. This week, I'm joined by Pablo Gonzalez. Pablo, thank you so much for being here.
Aaron, I'm happy to be here, brother. I do not take a stage lightly, so the fact that you are sharing it with me is an absolute honor, bud.
I appreciate that. So, for my audience, tell them a little bit about yourself, your background, who you are, and what you're currently doing.
Yeah, I'm somebody that's been obsessed with relationships my whole life, right? I moved around 3 different continents before the age of 9, and that made me have this very deep sense of need for belonging and arriving somewhere and feeling like I belonged immediately and making other people feel like they belonged. And as I matured through my life and I realized that gave me a really high degree of emotional intelligence, I used it to serve myself. Right. And what I mean by that is I knew I could talk people into getting what I wanted, right? Like sales, manipulation, whatever you want to call it, man. And then at a certain point in my early 30s, thanks to getting really involved with nonprofits like Miami Lighthouse for the Blind and Habitat for Humanity and stuff like that, I started realizing that the most influential people in society are not the ones that selfishly use relationships to serve themselves. They're the ones that serve others and therefore have the best relationships. And that completely changed my mindset at that time. And I realized that really the relationships that you can get are based on the value you have to offer others.
100%. That's so true.
Yeah, man. And then another thing happened where, a couple of years later, my brother got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He fought it for 2 years, lost that battle. And at his funeral, 1,200 people showed up. And at that moment, 2 really big, deep things hit me. And it's one, that community is the greatest value you can give people, right? Like that community that showed up for us, that supported us throughout the whole struggle was really what got us through in a semi-normal state and what helped us through the hardest moments. And the other part is, out of those 1,200 people, I got a lot of people reaching out to me for the following months to tell me about what they thought about my brother. And each and every one of them told me that my brother was this guy that really lit up a room, right? That he really made everybody feel welcome. He made everybody want to be there. And, having a brother that's 8 years older than you is a funny thing because we were very close. He was the best man at my wedding. I was the best man at his. But I always kind of used this example as what I didn't want to be, right? Like I was kind of like, well, Bert did this, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this. And after his passing, I realized, oh my God, my brother shows up for people the way that I have always really valued that I show up. And I never gave him credit for that. And immediately my head went to, what am I missing? Right? Like what else am I missing? If somebody that I love so dearly, I miss that. Like what am I not learning from that guy that I think is my loser uncle? What am I not learning from that person that I already judged? And it hit me that the people around us have more value than we even give them credit for to those around them, right? Like if you really seek it and you can really look at people from a curious, non-judgmental standpoint, you can learn something from everybody. And that motor of community is the idea of seeing people's value, articulating it to other people and to yourself, and allowing people to serve from that value that they have to offer others, right?
Yeah.
And ever since then, I've just been on this mission, man, to prove that you can drive business development through community creation. And it's led me down a couple of really interesting paths from, I was a Fortune 500 exec, that then became a green building expert, started a company that got acquired by a big hospital builder. I went in-house as director of sustainability, then became a business developer. Then I went and became the VP of business development for a tech startup. And then the whole time proving this thesis over and over in different iterations. And it's led me to this formula that I call the relationship flywheel, which is when you marry this idea that if you can get really good at finding people's value and put them on a stage to serve other people,
Yeah.
then you create this like self-feeding effect that everybody gets to share their value with people at scale. And that ends up creating community. And once you start gathering content around all that stuff, then it really, really starts to scale. And that's what my life's been about, man. I'm just somebody that's really trying to solve for how do we create community? How do I get people to figure out their superpower and serve from that superpower? And the more I do that, the better my life gets, man. You know?
And that's so important. And I think that so many people take relationships for granted. I mean, I'm someone who believes that relationships are the most important thing. I value relationships very highly. I think that, relationships need to be first in everything in your life, and focus on relationships, add value, and then good things will come. You know, I think if you focus on relationships, money will come down the road, other things will come down the road, and so many good things will come from them. And because you never know how you'll be able to connect, collaborate, and expand what you both have going on. And you know, the next relationship could be the main key to your success in the future.
100%, man. We live in this world. I think there's a couple misunderstood truths about life, right? One is too many people are transaction driven, right? Like they're trying to think of what this moment can do for them, what this person can do for them. But if you become relationship driven, it leads to much more. And it
Yeah.
feeds into this concept that I think we're conditioned for it, right? Because our first 18 to 22 years of life, we're playing these finite games, right? Like we're living in this structured world that has rules, that there are winners and losers based on the system that's created. There's a beginning and an end. But once you become an adult, like once you get out of college or grad school, you're in an infinite game, right?
Yeah.
Like the rules are always changing. There is no winners and losers. There's just moments to learn from and or moments to reap and moments to sow. And if you can approach life from a valuing relationships over transactions, then you start to play that infinite game, because that's stuff that never goes away, right? Like relationships are a asset that build upon themselves. They never subtract if you're doing it correctly.
100%. That's so important. You know, what led you, do you think, from your role as, a Fortune 500 executive, like you said, down the path that you are today, working for a startup, doing everything you're doing now, what made you leave that, corporate culture, let's say?
I think if I have to say one word, it's intuition. But if I go back and deeply happened, I had this executive and training position out of college, Fortune 500, took over the Orange County division of a, Fortune 500 company, managed 120 people at the age of 24 years old with with a $15 million operation under my belt. Out there, I became a green building expert. Once I became a green building expert, I found the part of construction that I really loved, right? Like again, infinite game, sustainability,
Yeah.
right? Like thinking long-term. Green
Yeah.
building is really just building something that's going to be as efficient as possible with as few materials as possible. It's going to last as long as possible, right? So to me, it was best practices. So
Yeah.
I leaned into what felt good. Then in 2009, when the world collapsed, I had become this green building expert. I didn't want to be an operator in the construction world. So I moved back to Miami, started this green building consulting company.
Yeah.
At that point, man, what really changed the game for me was getting involved in nonprofits, right? Like I got this random email from Habitat for Humanity from my best friend saying that they want to start a young professionals group. And I thought to myself, again, I was thinking transaction oriented, right? I thought, if I get involved with Habitat for Humanity, I'm this green building consultant, like it's going to lead to business. And none of that stuff really led to business in the first like 4 or 5 years. But what happened was I started this group. I became the president of it. Then I got on the board of Habitat. Then I did this Leadership Miami program. Then I came out and I got on the board of Miami Lighthouse for the Blind and for Dream and Green and Habitat. And then eventually the Economic Development Agency of Miami, right? So like I just started kind of eating up the food chain of intuitively leaning into these community endeavors, because I felt that no matter what was happening, right? Like during that time, my green building company got acquired by my biggest client. And once I went in-house for them, I was like, well, now I'm back in corporate America. I can either spend my time trying to impress this one dude up on the food chain with me, or I can spend my time out in society creating these relationships and diversifying my influence and learning all these soft skills that started to dawn on me, the ability to be a public speaker, the ability to walk into a room and network the crap out of it, right?
Yeah.
Like that, all this access I was gaining,
100%.
that just started feeling good, man. You know what I mean? Like that was just like, that would feed my soul. So
Yeah.
I would lean more and more into that. And the rest of it is a derivatives of all that stuff, right? Like I was able to go from being, business developer for a hospital builder to being the VP of business development for a startup tech company, not because of the stuff I learned at work. It was because of the stuff I learned in organizing people and leading movements and creating community and being a public speaker and all that stuff. And then from that point on, that's when I discovered content. And then I realized that that's the kerosene to the fire of relationship building. Right.
And so how has content, do you think, really lit that fire, with everything that you do, your podcast, with social media? How has content really contributed to it and helped it grow?
Great question, man. I was literally, so I was talking with Chris Ross earlier today. I know we're common friends.
Great,
right?
Great guy.
Yeah. Awesome guy. And we got into this deep content talk. So I'm super prepared to talk content right now. So listen, man, as I was networking through the world of nonprofits, it was very clear to me that the most powerful people were the ones that would meet somebody, find out what they're about, and then go introduce them to the people that were seeking what this person was about. Right. So then I'm like, how can I scale this? And what I've realized is that everything that you can do person to person, you can do while creating content, especially in this COVID world where everybody's so conditioned to Zoom calls, right? Like everything that you can do, and it's what Gary Vee's been doing this whole time, right? Like everything that you can do person to person, you can capture it in content. You just got to be willing to put in the extra effort of hitting record when you're on a Zoom call, or if something special is happening, busting out your phone and just keep going on as if nothing, right? And once you do that, as I said, like the stage is the key kind of magnifier of going from one to one to one to many, right? Like when you're public speaking, you can talk to one person or you can be on a stage and talk to 500, right?
But I think the key there, and I think you might be getting to this, but with that is like when you're on a stage and you're talking to 500 people, you want each person to the audience feel like you're talking to them one to one.
Yeah. Yeah. And 100%, right? And that's really hard to do on a stage with 500 people in front of you. But if you're making content about a one-to-one interaction that you're having with someone, it's much more intuitive because you're really just talking to one person. And then if you record that and you can share that stuff, now anybody that can come across that content can have the feeling of being the third person in that conversation. So now what that means is that it's called propinquity, right? The likeness, how much you feel like and how comfortable you become with someone based on your exposure to them. It's called propinquity, right? So that propinquity that happens when you and me hang out a bunch of times with our third friend in the room, that can now happen when you and me are not hanging out. Right? Like it can just happen when somebody's scrolling through your Instagram feed or someone's binging on your podcast or someone is reading your blog. You know what I mean? Like, so to me, it was that core concept that content is the scale, man. Like content is the way to do it when you're not around.
100%.
And that's it, man. Just lean into that.
That's awesome. With everything you have going on, where do you see yourself in the future? What are your goals? What is the roadmap for expanding everything you're doing, whether it be with your podcast, your content, your business, everything that you have? What is the roadmap and the goals for you as life moves on?
So in early 2019, when I left that startup, I took a 90-day purposeful pause to just think about what my next move is, and not just think about what my next move is, but what I want my next 10 years to be, right? I wanted to find my goal and reverse engineer. So I'm real clear on this. I want to prove to the world that community creation is the future of business development. And I want to prove to the world that the person across from you is more of an asset than a threat, right? How I'm doing that is I have created this service that is implementing this relationship flywheel for companies and corporations that use the same mechanisms. And if you want, I can break down the methodology behind it. But right now I'm doing this thing as a service, as a high paid service, and as I've done that, I've been able to build up the capacity to do it for myself. right? So right now I have a couple of like really high paying clients that I'm doing this for that are having record breaking sales quarters because they've been doing this for a year now. My calendar is booked out for like a month and a half because, again, relationship flywheel, I get more and more access to people I want to talk to. And the future of it is it's very similar. And I didn't set out to do this on purpose, even though he is one of my great inspirations. It's very similar to Gary Vee, right? Like Gary Vee built a marketing machine to serve others so then he can serve himself. So then by serving himself, he's able to serve public at large for free and give these people the knowledge to then build his legend to put him up on that next phase.
So what's the method behind this? And if it's kind of like somewhat secretive because
No, it's not secretive,
tell
bro.
us to your, okay. So what's the method behind this?
Yeah, man. So again, I'm trying to get this out as much as possible, right? Like I really do want to change the world with this method because I think this is the key to making a relationship driven world. The method behind it is this. If you know what you're trying to accomplish, Aaron, then you know who you need to serve, right? Like you know who you need to get there, whether it's a clientele, whether it's a type of person, you know, whatever community, whatever faction of people you want to build up, you need to get real clear on who they are, right? And I like to say, find a way to serve the people with the keys to the doors that you want to open, right? So whether it is a clientele or whether it is, you know, a group of other, you know, an industry that you're trying to get in front of, right?
Yeah.
Find a way to serve the people with the keys to the doors you want to open. So once you know who they are and you understand where you have to assume that what you are trying to do for them is one of the things that they want, right? Like, if not, you're in the wrong group, right?
100%.
And once you figure that out, you got to also do the work of figuring out what else do they want that's in line with what you're trying to serve them with, right?
Yeah.
So once you figure that, that's step one, right? It's just understand who you're trying to serve and what they need, because that's the only way, again, provide value, right? And the methodology has three concepts: value, relationships, and content, right? So the value piece is understanding what these people need and then taking inventory from that audience themselves of who has some of that value to offer them, from your existing network who has value to offer them, and from people that you can reach out to that has value to offer them. So that's the value piece. That's what's going to attract people's attention, right? So now you create some kind of a stage, be it a podcast, be it a live Zoom call, be it whatever, where you can interact with them, right? A clubhouse room, right? Today, Facebook Live, Instagram Live. And now you promote that you're going to have a conversation with somebody that is valuable to them, right? That has the key to a door that they want to open. You have this conversation with that person in front of this audience, and it can be an audience of 3, 5 to 70, right? But you're having this conversation a la Chamber of Commerce panel, a la, you know, like Facebook Live where people can ask questions, whatever, right? And as you're doing that, now it's the next part of the flywheel, which is the relationship piece. When you're having this conversation, you're thinking about 3 different relationships. You're thinking about the relationship between you and the person that you're interviewing, right? Having a conversation with. That person should be a strategic relationship that you're trying to build, right? Like that is the same as taking out your dream client to dinner and getting to know their hopes and dreams and who can you introduce them to, right? Same thing. Or an industry leader that you're trying to get close to, or a boss that you're trying to impress, whatever. You're building that relationship normally the way you should be building relationships, which is like seeking out their value, right? Like acknowledging the things that they're good at, right? Like creating options for ways that you can collaborate. While you're doing that, you're also enabling the relationship between you and the audience, right? So the people at large, because you're there in front of them, providing them, you know, this valuable conversation where they're learning from it and they get to see you, they now start thinking that, oh, I just got a 1-hour call with Aaron, right? But really, you know, if 6 people think they got a 1-hour call with you, that just saved you 6 hours of your day, right? So you're enabling that relationship because you're in front of them and they feel like you're speaking to them. And then the third relationship you're enabling is between your guest and your audience, right? So you're sourcing questions from the audience at some point in a Q&A format, and you're not just like reading a question on screen or taking a question from them and asking them. You phrase the question in a way that it feels like they're being introduced, right? So, hey, Aaron, who is, an up and coming keynote speaker that's going to take over the world and show people how to overcome their shortcomings. He's got a question because he's in this point of his business. This is your question, right? So like you're very purposely framing how you know the audience to the person that you are having a conversation with, right? So you're driving those 3 relationships while you're on that stage. And then comes the content piece. As long as you're doing that, as long as you're bringing somebody valuable, driving those 3 relationships, and you're recording content around it, then you have the ability to take that 1-hour piece of content and turn it into a 1-hour branded YouTube show, a 10 minutes of YouTube best of, 5 best 2 minutes of conversation that you put on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, a 5 best questions asked from the audience where their name makes it into the micro content so that they feel they're getting a piece of that stage. 5 quote cards from the best thing said. The audio becomes a podcast. The lessons learned from the interview in bullet points becomes an email. The expanded bullet points from the email becomes a blog post that's SEO optimized. And then now you've taken this one seed, this one moment where you were enabling these 3 relationships, bringing value to your people, and you've planted that seed in 20 different pots across 6 different ecosystems. And now you're reaching scale. And the more that you do that week after week, you're going to understand that because you're promoting whoever you have on stage with you with all these things, right? And you're introducing them to so many people, then you're going to get better and better guests that have more value to your audience. So your audience is going to grow so that your content is going to get more exposure. That exposure brings more value to the stage, which brings more audience, which brings more content. It's a flywheel. It just keeps growing, right? So I do this on a personal level. And again, I've explained a bunch of different parts, but any part that you're doing, right? You're doing a podcast and you make some micro content, like any part that's doing this is growing your network exponentially. And as that network grows, you can make more and more content. You can have better and better guests. And then if you add the live piece where you're actually also interacting with your dream clients, that's going to add fuel to the fire because people see themselves on the stage. So it's trying to give as many people a piece of that stage as possible. So that's the methodology, man.
I think that's awesome. I think one thing that a lot of people also, they build relationships and they are very, very relationship focused, but that they don't do. And I think a lot more people need to be doing is, I think people, when I get close with someone and I build a relationship, they know, for example, you have an open reign of anyone in my network. Like if you see someone on Instagram or on LinkedIn or anywhere that I'm connected to, I don't care who it is, and you want to get connected to them, just shoot me a text and say, hey, can you help connect me to him? And I'll absolutely say yes anytime. And or I'll go out of my way if I come across someone who I think you need to get connected to send you guys a DM together and be like, you two need to meet. Whereas I think that most people don't do that. And I think that really adds a lot of value when either A, you're actively connecting others, or B, people just know, like, if there's someone in my network you want to be connected to, let me know and I'll do it.
100%, man. 100%. So what you're saying is like hand-to-hand combat, right? Like my methodology that I'm describing is so that you're just it all the time. And the frictionless way of you doing that. Let's say you want to introduce 5 people to somebody. You just have an event where you interview that person and these people are in the room, right? So like that's just how to do it more. But yeah, then every other thing that you can lean into that, right? Like now you also, if you think about it, right? If you wanted to introduce me to someone in your network, what's the better introduction? A text saying you two should meet, or a piece of 2-minute content of you talking to me about the thing that you want that person to know about that you send to that person. You know what I mean? So it's all just enabling those introductions. But yes, the introductions are the base of it, right? For me, the stage is a way to introduce one to many. And then the pieces of content are a way to make the one-to-one introductions easier. But at the foundation of it is to be giving, man, to see the people that are valuable, pair them with people seeking that value, and rinse and repeat, man.
100%. I love that. What advice would you give someone who's early on in their career, or looking for a change, or looking to grow their relationships, just in general? If someone had a couple minutes with you and said, I want to create success in my life, how can I go about that?
I'd give them 2 pieces of advice, man. My first piece of advice is go join the young professionals group of a nonprofit that you care about, right? Like go out there, get into society, right? Like the most influential people in your town are on the boards of nonprofits. And if you can walk in that door of value by serving their nonprofit, you have access to them. And if you can be in these young professionals, it's going to work on all your soft skills. The second is to build a stage for yourself, right? Like I used having young professional groups and being the head of young professional groups as an audience that I could then feed from a stage, right? But nowadays, if you don't want to go that route, you can start a podcast, you can start a YouTube channel, you can start an email list or a blog. And now whenever you reach out to whoever you want to speak to, even if it's a blog, right? Like if I wanted to talk to you, Aaron, and I was a young person that just wanted to learn from you, and I was worried about whether you had the time of day for me, would you be more likely to say yes to 15 minutes of coffee with me or 15 minutes of me picking your brain for a blog article that I'm going to write and quote you in?
I mean, more likely the second one. I think I'm different
Yeah.
than most people, and I'd say yes to either. But yeah, the
Yeah.
second one.
But you know where I'm going, right? Like if you have
Yeah.
both offers at the same time, you're going to prioritize the other one, right? So like
Yeah.
building yourself a stage, building yourself a platform where you can now have an excuse to go talk to people and walk in the door of value. Because at the end of the day, everybody can use a little extra promotion about the stuff they care about.
Oh, 100%. And that's why, I've been able to meet some of the people I've been able to meet because, I've been really actively working on growing my network and my social media. And, I'm at the point where very recently I got my Instagram verified. My Instagram is over, 30 something thousand followers at this point. So if I reach out to someone and say, hey, do you want to come on my podcast? There's a much better chance they say yes now than they would have 7, 8 months ago because of my network and my audience now. And they want to share, their story to, that audience.
Yep. Yeah, exactly, man. The bigger the stage, the more value you can put on it, right? It's the flywheel. Like that you're a living example of it.
100%, man. Well, first off, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it. I know that everyone will get a lot of value from this. Where can people find you, your content, your podcast, your social media?
Yeah, man. Aaron, first of all, I want to thank you, dude. Like you are such an inspiration, man. Like I'm happy, like I told you this on my podcast, right? But like I have a nephew that's visually impaired. I see in you the guy that I want him to become, man. And it's really great to have that connection with you. And I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah.
As far as finding me, Connect with Pablo is kind of my moniker everywhere, right? My website is connectwithpablo.com. My email address is youShould@connectwithpablo.com. My Instagram is connectwithpablo. My business page is bethestage.live. And really most importantly, man, is my podcast is my baby too, right? Like if you want to see the implementation of the relationship flywheel in the sense of me building rapport with people and sharing it to the world and like giving you the tips and tricks of everything that I'm learning as I build my own relationship flywheel, the Chief Executive Connector podcast is my podcast. Or if you search Pablo Gonzalez on any podcast app with a Z at the end, with a name like that, dude, it's like the John Smith of South America. and it's the first time, like I can't rank on Google. I can't, like I'm impossible to search on Facebook or LinkedIn. Good luck. But if you search for me on iTunes or Spotify or any of the podcast apps, my 2 shows are the first 2 shows. It's the Chief Executive Connector and the Not Your Average Investor Show, which is all about building passive investment income.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you, man. This has been awesome, dude.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it at all, if you got one thing out of it, we'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe, rate, and review. Thank you.